Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Bless you. Welcome to another episode of Make It Plain. Remember, MIP is COVID-free, free to all subscribers for a limited time. So tell a friend as we deal with this pandemic and really now police-demic as well, isn't it? The Poor People's Campaign is coming up June 20th. June2020.org. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber continuing the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when Dr. King was assassinated. And so we talked with Reverend Barber, and we thought it would be meaningful to share as we lead up to the June 20th date, some personal stories, some human stories from individuals who are dealing with poverty in their lives and the lives of others whom they are helping. Poverty is real. Poverty affects one's ability to be treated in terms of health care. Poverty also affects where people live when it comes to police occupation. And so that's why Dr. King saw poverty as a priority when it came to his movement and to his life. Christine lives in South Carolina, and she has a story to tell. So for the next few days, we'll hear some of these stories from South Carolina. Here's Christine's story.
My name is Christine Riccio. I lived here in South Carolina since 1997. Poverty and homelessness have been a part of my life story since I was 10 years old. When I left the abusive home to live with relatives and then spent my teen years placed in different homes. Here in South Carolina, I lived with my boyfriend and extended family in Gaston, about 45 minutes outside of Columbia, where we owned a small trailer. It was hard to survive there without a car. Without a car, we couldn't pay our bills month to month. We ended up selling everything that we owned left to move to Charleston. That way we knew we'd get transportation. When we moved here, we got a place, but again, the temp services wasn't enough to keep us in money to pay the bills. We were short $160 for the rent one month. We asked the landlord for extension for 3 days, and the next thing we know, we got eviction notice, so we moved. We ended up being homeless, living in a tent in a campground in Hollywood where we paid about $200 a month with me and my boyfriend and my brother-in-law and our 3 dogs. We ended up losing our truck because of a title loan trying to save a home. We moved downtown Charleston to Meeting on Lee Street, where we bought another tent to live in and prayed that the walls wouldn't shake too bad when the wind blew. We had to beg businesses to use their bathroom. The mayor at this time told the cops to get us off the street. They didn't want the homeless there no more of the tent city. So we had to move. The shelter came to us and asked us to go, but I had my 2 dogs, which I wasn't willing to give up. I lost everything else. You could replace materials. My dogs weren't my material, they were my family. So I wasn't giving them up. I lost enough without nothing. My boyfriend is a veteran. He served from 86 to 92. Because of paperwork mix-up, he couldn't get no help from the veterans till 2017. He was in the Navy. He just now got help for his medical condition, which is depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's hard on him. He wants to commit suicide too. When you never had to be hungry, people in Washington are sending war machines to other countries to build war against others instead of homes for people here, or medical for people here, or food for people here, for children that are sleeping in their cars, that don't have, that go to bed hungry at night. It's not right, not in this city that's this wealthy. We shouldn't be this poor.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Why should we be without? Why should a president sit there and tell me I'm no good when you never had to be without? You always had a meal in your food and a roof over your head. You never had to be without. Who are you to judge me or anybody here?
That's right.
Because we've all been hungry and we've all been homeless, and we're only one paycheck away from being homeless.
That's right.
That's right.
So if you think it's not hard, look at your brother next to you.
That's right.
You might have and they might not. And even the ones that don't have are still willing to share with you.
That's right.
So God bless you all, and thank you for standing up and coming to June 20, 2020, on Moral Revival.
For People's Campaign personal stories. We'll be sharing some of those with you in the days leading up to the Poor People's Campaign. June 2020.org. Ladies and gentlemen, in the midst of all that is happening, we must consider voting this fall, really before this fall. There are primaries and special elections and what have you that are going to be taking place. How are we going to do that? How are we going to secure our voting rights and keep them secure? How are we going to confront voter suppression? Joining us now, she was formerly a part of Let America Vote and also an attorney with the Advancement Project. She is now the director of the Voting Rights Program for the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, one of our civil rights legacy organizations. We're happy to have with us Leigh Chapman. Leigh, how are you? And first of all, I'm hoping you and yours are healthy and safe in this period.
Thank you so much, Mark. We're doing the best we can, but thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's deal with what's evident as you are working hard to secure our voting rights and keeping them protected. What are your thoughts about the latest developments, the demonstrations, the police violence, and how is that impacting your work?
Yeah, Mark, right now our nation is really in a moment of reckoning, and that's what we're seeing with the protests, with everything that's happening right now in our country. And, it was really interesting yesterday because we've had many consecutive nights of protests, and we had 8 primary elections yesterday in our country. And voters turned out. There were long lines around the country. We saw people stand in 5- and 6-hour lines yesterday in places like Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, places where people have been out protesting to, protect the lives of Black bodies every single night over the last week. And, they protested at the ballot box too. And I think that it's really encouraging to see, people are fired up. They want change right now. And I'm hoping that this level of intensity will continue through November, and people will also protest at the ballot box.
I hope and pray that is true, and I believe that. However, I'm going to share something with you, and just get your real-time reaction to it. I've been talking to several people working with some of the young people, millennials and Generation Z. We know historically the challenge in keeping them engaged in the electorate and getting them out to vote.
Right.
And the word on the street, so to speak, is that they're so angry, many of them, and so frustrated with the system that they don't give one about voting. And so the what was said to me now is that the challenge is to somehow show them the importance of voting in this situation as they see their lives at stake and being killed. They don't necessarily see the connection. You and I know there is.
Right.
But the question is, you know, whether there's enough time to reach them on the media where they get their information from and they get their knowledge from, you know, the pro and con. You know, what can be done about that? So what's your reaction as I share that with you? I can't really be in denial about it. That's plausible, but it was very troubling to me when I heard that. So, but what are your thoughts about that, and how might that inform your organizing going forward, Leigh?
Yeah, I mean, people are definitely entitled to feel the way they feel, and right now people are feeling like democracy, the system, is not in their best interests. But I think activists, organizations, civil rights leaders, everybody, we need to do a better job at connecting the issues that people care about with voting. We need to do a better job to talk about how prosecutors and the district attorney is elected, that sheriffs are elected, and people have that power to get this person out of office, and it's not just the president. These local elections are critical, and we just have not been doing a good enough job at saying why people need to vote, why they need to vote their values, and why that's so critical to do, especially this year when we're faced with COVID-19. We're faced with, a president who is threatening our democracy every day. We're faced with just trying to survive every day. But the biggest form of protest that people can engage in right now, in addition to peacefully protesting in the street or however people want to do it, is casting their ballot, making sure you're registered to vote, making sure your family and friends are registered to vote, and casting your ballot in primary elections and in November as well. And in every election.
And you answered that question in just the way it should have been, because there's still much more education needs to happen about down ballot and about, I'll be honest, we had a hard time in 2016, not just young people, everybody understanding that they were also voting for the Supreme Court.
Right.
Folk get caught up in one personality and one office. So no, this is, and I think people realize that late, but you're right. We talk about prosecutors and elected officials who appoint police chiefs.
Right. Yeah.
But just as we're talking, Leigh, it just comes to mind, if you don't mind. Sometimes I don't just do interviews. I like to have meetings in real time. Maybe all of us ought to be saying it also, not only the way you said it, but this way. What do you think? That police violence itself is a form of voter suppression. Because if it leads people to frustration, desperation, and despair, where they feel like they're helpless and can't vote to change it anyway. Let's be honest. When we lost the right to vote after Reconstruction during Reclamation, it was that loss of the right to vote by 1900 was in direct consort with violence and lynchings.
Right.
So the suppression and the violence really can be separated, can they?
No, and it's so embedded in in our world right now. Just look at felony disenfranchisement laws. Those are really established to prevent people of color from voting. That's, a vestige of Jim Crow. And, look what happened in Florida. In 2018, voters decided that they don't want this law. Florida's law prevented 1.5 million people with felony convictions from casting their ballot. And in 2018, voters turned out and they voted to allow people with felony convictions to vote. But then what we saw was right away, the state legislature instituted a bill to say that you have to pay your fines and fees before you can vote, which is a poll tax, right? Some people had tens and hundreds of thousands of fines and fees, and were not able to pay. And actually, just recently, a federal court held that that law violates the 24th Amendment of the United States Constitution. It is a poll tax, and voters in Florida with felony convictions are entitled to vote without paying those fines and fees. So, yes, you're right. It's really embedded in how our democracy works. But people need to fight, and one way of fighting is at the ballot box by casting their ballot.
Yeah, and I think if people understood that there's a connection between the violence and getting us to think that voting won't help, because I say sometimes people don't take it that far. They see the violence as just an assault on Black lives, just like that. But it leads to other things and encourages other things to happen. So one of the ways to fight back against police violence is to actually vote.
Yes.
So I'm just saying that's very, very important. So there's also the vote by mail. Where are we on that? Tell us a bit about the work you're doing to secure that and help make that more accessible, Leigh.
Sure. So because we're in a pandemic right now, states need an infusion of money to prepare for the November elections. And experts have estimated it's going to cost around $4 billion for the country to be prepared, meaning having enough funds to mail ballots to voters, have enough funds so poll workers can have that protective equipment, and to just expand more voting opportunities, like having those drop boxes that we saw around Philadelphia yesterday, where people can just drop off their absentee ballot. So right now, election officials are woefully unprepared. We saw that in Wisconsin, 70 people actually contracted COVID on election day. Yesterday we saw long lines in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. And like we said, it's wonderful that people are protesting, they're showing up, they're going to vote, but we also want to make sure that voters are safe, that they don't have to stand in long lines, and states actually need money in order to make that happen. So that's what we're doing. We are lobbying Congress, particularly we're lobbying the Senate, because the House actually passed a bill called the HEROES Act a few weeks ago that had everything we wanted. It had $3.6 billion in funds, but it's currently just sitting in McConnell's legislative graveyard, and he's not doing anything. So, right now we're seeing that many Republicans, just people who don't want to have an inclusive democracy in our country, are saying that vote by mail leads to fraud. They don't want people to have access to vote by mail, and that's not true. Vote by mail is safe and secure. And the fact that we're in a pandemic right now, we need to give voters all the options possible, and that includes mailing them ballots and ballot applications.
The money that is being discussed now, that there is some resistance to from McConnell, and we'll get back to that in a minute, but I just want people to kind of grasp the dollar figure. I mean, we're talking about, is the number $3 billion? No,
$3.6 billion.
Wow.
It's actually just a drop in a hat when you're talking about these $1 trillion stimulus packages. It's really not that much. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money to protect our democracy.
And it probably, if we really did a deep dive, it probably still isn't quite enough, is it? Probably could stand more. Right.
Of course. Yeah.
From what I also understand, there's the need to get that money through, but like right now, the clock is ticking. Some states, to really get things set up the right way, rightly, would have needed to have gotten started yesterday.
Yes. And states are making these decisions now. And, if we're going to move to vote by mail, local jurisdictions need to have scanners so that they can scan absentee ballots. They have to buy them, right? And they're manufactured. There's one manufacturer in Germany. They have to get them shipped over. So, there's all these logistic hurdles that local jurisdictions face. So that's why they need the money right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Senate. I mentioned McConnell. What are our prospects? So just on the process, the House is a part of this too, right?
Yes.
And we're probably, I guess we're in pretty decent shape with the House. That's not the hurdle. It's then getting it to the other folk. And I mean, I guess we would say, honestly, that any resistance they show to this voting by mail is in and of itself a form of voter suppression.
Exactly. And, there are Republican states that have vote by mail and it works well. There's
Right.
Republican secretaries of state who have also said it works well. Donald Trump himself uses vote by mail. His press secretary herself uses vote by mail. So, we're making the case in every which way we can. We have different messengers in our coalition that are making that case, because it's not, vote by mail doesn't favor one party or another. It's just about making sure that people have access to the ballot during a pandemic and making sure that voting is safe and secure and accessible.
Many of the voters in his constituency who are 55 to 65 and older, white voters vote by mail.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's not in his best interest to try to stop vote by mail.
And many of them are also predisposed to the danger of COVID.
Right.
But you know what, Lee, doggone, they've gone on Fox and said, well, some of y'all just going to have to sacrifice your lives and die for the good. Now, how that endears people to vote for one, I don't know. But that's what's going on. And so here's the other thing, because I was talking to some other groups too, because there's another layer to this. As many of you listening to us will know, just imagine the last time you went to vote in person, many of the people working in the voting booths, who are in those volunteer roles working for these boards of elections, God bless them, and we need them, are themselves seniors.
Yes.
Who are volunteering. So then that opens up a whole nother thing of risk.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of having access to the ballot. And we know that there'll still have to be open places because some people go in person, but then you've got to provide protection,
right,
and contingency plans for those who are at risk who are working in the voting booth. So that's part of that money.
Yeah. And we shouldn't have to choose between our safety and democracy, and that's why we're saying voters need every option necessary. We need vote by mail. We need to have expanded ways to register, right? Not every state has online registration.
That's right.
We need to have ample early voting, so at least 2 weeks of early voting, so people can go and vote, have social distance, so they're not in long lines, they're not in crowded places. If we really provide all of these options, then we will have a smooth election as we can in November, because we might have another spike of COVID in the fall. So that's why it's so critical that we have all the options necessary.
So you mentioned lobbying. What's it look like? Is there a magic number? Are there people who are leaning? Are there some swing votes that need to be targeted in the Senate? Are you in a position to share any of that?
I think right now the timing is up in the air. So the HEROES Act passed the House 2 weeks ago. It's now sitting in McConnell's legislative graveyard. So we're trying to drive emails, tweets, calls, whatever we can to the Senate. I think it's important for people to call their senator, whether it's a Republican or Democratic senator, because, once again, we still want to make sure that Democrats can hold the line on this and make sure that they are also advocating in the Senate to protect our democracy. So right now, I say that, we just need it's an all hands on deck moment, and we just need people to call their senators, email their senators, contact them, and just say, we need to have safe and accessible elections in 2020. But one thing I would say is the Leadership Conference has a campaign called Instill I Vote. And we launched this Instill I Vote campaign in Selma, Alabama, during the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday this year. And the purpose of the campaign is, to shine a spotlight on barriers to the ballot, and to really mobilize people to take action. So I would encourage everyone to go to our website, which is andstillivote.org, to sign up. And we will be sending emails to people who are signing up saying, here's how you contact your senator. Oh, you live in New York? This is what you can do to make sure your elections are protected. So we are mobilizing and building that army of supporters, which is so needed right now, especially since we are now, 5 months from the November elections and we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. Folks, the website is fantastic. If you are feeling any way apathetic, just go to andstillIvote.org and you will be inspired to get yourselves together and get involved. This is great. Leigh obviously is an African-American woman. The image on the website andstillIvote.org is an African-American woman. It's taken a century, but I think finally now people are realizing the role that Black women have played and are playing in terms of bringing about change. I mean, I think this is the most important constituency that we have now. And Leigh, I'm sure you'd agree that in this pandemic and in this this period of unrest and demonstration and police violence, that this is something concrete that we can do. If we show up in the same numbers as we're showing up in the streets, we can do something about this.
Yeah, I agree. This is our power. Voting is all about power, and voter suppression is about power. And we can't let people take our power away. This is how we can stand up and reclaim that power. Yeah,
folks. So this is it. This is our opportunity. We've had you go to andstillIvote.org and find out more. They even have something here called Turn Up Tuesday, where they do a weekly web series talking about what's going on. So as we're moving and mobilizing and in the streets, it is so important. And that we advocate on the local level as well. And you know what? Just mentioning, Leigh, some of those Board of Elections folks, like I said, we've kind of conceded that to older retired people, but some of us young folk might just have to do that.
Yeah.
Some of us may need to decide that this year and going forward, we're going to start volunteering.
Right.
Right?
Yes, we need younger people in these poll worker roles. One thing that we always hear from local election officials is it's so hard to recruit poll workers. It's so difficult. And that's one way that you can volunteer to help protect our democracy. Also, so some people don't know, but in places like Pennsylvania, the head poll worker in each polling place is elected. So that's also a way that you can start getting involved in the political process and start, running for office, is to be that head poll worker. It's a really good entry point if you're participating in elected positions.
As a matter of fact, you were in the Department of State or Secretary of State's office in Pennsylvania, weren't you?
Yes, I was the Director of Policy in 2016. So one of the things that we did was we helped implement the online voter registration system when I was there in 2016.
Yeah. Very important. So you've been at this for a while. Just as I said that out loud, I can't help but remember one of my mentors, now an ancestor, Dr. C. Loris Tucker.
Yes.
Who I believe was in that office.
Yes, she was Secretary of State of Pennsylvania.
Right. Yeah. And what a legacy. Again, a Black woman who, along with, speaking of Black women, along with Shirley Chisholm, founded the National Political Congress of Black Women, which is now headed by Dr. Ife Williams. So Leigh is coming from that lineage, folks, and we are thankful for her. So, andstillIvote.org.
Yes.
Leigh, we appreciate you. Keep up the good work. You be careful. We probably don't need you to sacrifice yourself on these streets. We need you right where you are to make sure these voting booths and this vote by mail is taking place. So we all have the roles we need to be in, folks, and Leigh's is very important. Leigh, thank you for joining us. This will not be the last time we talk. And ladies and gentlemen, you'll be hearing more about what the Voting Rights Project and program is doing with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Again, one of our legacy organizations. I didn't get to share this with you last time we talked, but just to remind the audience, as you've heard me say before, the Clarence Mitchell Jr. And his descendants are members of my extended family. And at one time, Clarence Mitchell Jr. was the head of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, which is a coming together and a coalition of all of our civil rights organizations. And we're all very, very busy right now, but we cannot lose sight. We must keep our eyes on the prize when it comes to voting. And folks, I would also encourage you to as you engage others in the context of what's happening with all the frustration, let them know that that vote can be a difference, because it can elect secretaries of state and prosecutors and elected officials who then do hire police chiefs and other people in high-ranking positions. So the vote matters. And as Leigh and I discussed before, link it back to our history. Violence was used to intimidate us away from the ballot box. Let's not let it do that again. Leigh, thank you once again, and we'll talk again. And you feel free, on behalf of the project and on behalf of the conference, to call and give me or this audience any assignments, okay?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you, Leigh.
God, you are our refuge. Send our ancestors to guard our doors. Cast out this virus from our communities and our bodies. Heal, bless, and protect everyone listening and their loved ones. Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been Made Plain.